Hello, I'm Josh Maloney, the president of the Veteran Support Club at Cape Cod Community College. So far in this week, because it's Veterans Week, this will be our third presentation about veteran and military barriers. Short recap. Yesterday, we talked about military sexual trauma in the survivor. After that, we were able to get several subject matter experts local from the community to speak about awareness of programs and services to veterans. Today, we're moving on to a bigger subject, and we're going a generation or two back, and we're going to talk to a veteran from the Vietnam War, African-American that served his country at a time when virtually all war efforts were condemned. So, Ervin L. Tootsie Russel was featured in a PBS documentary, Basic Black, episode titled The Vietnam War. I think it really illustrates many of the barriers that not only all service members face, all veterans face, but particularly some of our minority veterans can face. And particularly, we can think about how the VA has changed for the better. I always take a chance to try and thank a veteran of a generation before mine, especially a veteran from the Vietnam or Korean, because those were the generations that really made remembering sacrifices at war a thing. And we needed to remember this. So it is an absolute honor that I get to introduce Ervin L. Tootsie Russel, a Massachusetts native, Vietnam veteran. Good morning, Tootsie.
Good morning. Yeah, it's typically pronounced Tootsie. Tootsie Roll. And good afternoon, everyone. And it's extremely an honor to be able to present myself to this image or this medium. And I'm Ervin L. Tootsie Russel. And Tootsie's a name I got when I was first born. I was in the hospital when I first born, and my sister came in and she seen me. She said, "Oh, isn't he cute? So chocolate, round and sweet, like a Tootsie Roll." So she came home and told all the kids, and when I got there, I couldn't say nothing. So it stuck. So that's been my nickname, Tootsie. I'm currently the chaplain of the Dudley L. Brown VFW Post 2846 in Onset, and also the chaplain of the Cape Verdean American Veterans Association. I like to classify myself as an American born of Cape Verdean descent Black man. I'm Black not because of the color of my skin, but because I know the Black experience of deprivation, discrimination, and degradation. I identify my heritage of being of Cape Verdean descent because it's a newly liberated or independent nation, and it required the support of the Western world. So I was anxious to identify that and get the support from all the political Western world. This is the Veterans Day occurrence, and November 11th, it's coming up, and the proclamation will probably be presented. Myself, I have had the experience of coming home alone, and I got discharged on December 24th. And I was able to get from Fort Lewis, Washington to Middleborough, Massachusetts before I let anybody know that I was coming home. And I had crutches because they released me. I had to sign myself out of the Army because I had an ankle injury, but they was getting ready to put it in a cast. But if they did that, I would be in a hospital or not able to get home for Christmas. And I did want to get home from Christmas after spending time in Southeast Asia.
Ervin.
Yes.
You have so much experience. It's really, really incredible. So I want to ask you a little bit about what was it like when you did you decide to join the military? So as a Black man, you decided to join the military in a time when you knew that services for military members and veterans in the first place aren't that tremendous.
Well, it wasn't choices. At that point in time, they had the Selective Service Board, and you'd get classified. And I was classified as 1A. So therefore, I was a primary candidate to be drafted, and along with a lot of other minorities in the area, because the Selective Service Board is harmonious, or as equitable as you like to make it think. It was predominantly people of stature and maybe white and wet and wealthy, but so most of us was classified as 1A. I went in and was going under a partner program with a fellow veteran, Collis James Rose, whom I hold an annual brunch for. He got killed in Vietnam in 1969, and then so I throw an annual Vietnam Veterans Day brunch where we acknowledge Collis James Rose, Richard Arruda, Ronnie Bumpus, and James Crowley. Those are 4 residents of Wareham that were killed in action during the Vietnam conflict. And but there wasn't a much of a choice. The draft board was very forceful and active. So there's the domination of and most of the people of color were not employed, or it was an economic deprivation at that point in time. So that was an employment opportunity almost to be in the service.
In the video, you describe your experiences in Vietnam, and it sounds appropriately horrifying. And that's not what we need to go about over today. I think we can jump straight to you're coming back. You show up at back at Wareham. You haven't told anyone. You're just on your way back from the military. You have a broken ankle. You're injured. I know what the VA has been tremendous for me. It has been, and it's been tremendous for me because of your generation. But your generation didn't have that. So I'm curious, what were the services as a veteran who just got back from combat in Massachusetts?
Well, we're part of the Rhode Island region. So our services were basically provided in Providence at Davis Park. So, when I came home, like I say, I had one crutch because I had thrown the other one away while I was en route, and had my brother come pick me up in Middleborough. And then I came home and greeted my mother, which had been praying for me all along. I'm a son of I was raised by a single parent and several other brothers and sisters, but my mother was just a remarkable person. She loved me very unconditionally. And so, but upon returning, I had all of the post-traumatic effects of not being aware of any of that reality. We drank a lot, substance abuse, and I would go to the VA and Providence, and they did an Agent Orange screening on me at that time, and I was unaware of that. Agent Orange's exposure or conditions. And one of the doctors told me, "Oh, don't worry about that Agent Orange. I use it on my gardens to weed my garden." So hey, I didn't know nothing about it, but I was suffering from different conditions, rashes and things like that. But the VA system was there, but Davis Park was the nearest access I had to it. It's 50 miles away. Today, there's a lot more involvement of clinics and outreach centers or VA clinics, basically. I did want to say about the Vietnam Veterans Outreach Center, which was put together later on, and I was able to utilize that to try to come to some sense of readjustment. the alienation and it went through in the beginning was incredible, because you would superficially meet people that had served in Vietnam, but you wouldn't discuss anything, and you'd hear voices in the background and saying, oh yeah, he served in Vietnam or whatever, and you wasn't sure about what their true intentions was, or what their definition of you were. But so you just suppressed it with alcohol or whatever means you had to escape from it and adjust, and it was, you didn't fit back in with your peers, because you had such a level of maturity, because you knew death, and some of your peers were there, and they still was in there. They didn't understand the responsibility of having served as a veteran in a war where people relied on you for their survival, and you relied on them, and that education, that exposure is something that's unreal to anybody other than the veteran, combat veteran.
Something you hit on is two things. One, I want to talk about your mother's love. That's something that I truly resonate with. I have an incredible mother, the most powerful person I know. So I like to hear that you talk nicely of her. My mother made a big dent on my life, and I'm here today because of her, past all the nonsense I've been through. So I like that you recognize that. I also recognize that I want to talk a little bit about, you said that you sought some resources from like private sector, non-VA, through like the Vietnam Veteran, a local chapter.
Well, it was the Vietnam Veterans Outreach Group, and it was a segment or they became a part of the VA.
Good.
Veterans Affairs Administration, but
and did that start as a private entity of Vietnam veterans trying to look out for each other, and then it became policy essentially at the VA?
It became evolved from a couple of psychologists and stuff that recognized the new terminology of shell shock and battle fatigue. They began to evolve, and so they developed the Veterans Outreach Center, but it evolved to a point where it is a major aspect of the Veterans Affairs, Department of Veterans Affairs.
Yesterday, we actually had Adam Doefler from the Hyannis Veterans Center speak, and the resources that they have at their dispense are incredible. And I know one of their big things is eligibility for service. And I know my generation of veteran has had some problems with this. It's just really confusing, but I think your generation more so.
You mean the benefits? You mean more benefits than?
Yes. I'd like to say from World War I, essentially no benefits when the government called anyone, any veteran asking for any type of help a bonuser, and basically said that they were 100% asking for handouts, and there was no such thing as trauma, until now that, hey, PTSD is not only a thing for combat veterans, but it's also a thing for many other types of trauma, justifiably. So my question is, I guess my statement is, the work that you all did as a generation to team together and to work together and to stand up for each other and be a team when you came back has resonated with the veteran community. And now that's the standard operating procedure for veterans in America. A big thing I used to hear in your generation was, let this never happen to another generation, I believe.
The Vietnam War was put together, the wall was put together by Vietnam veterans, for Vietnam veterans, but that opened the gates to to the recognition of the Korean War veteran sacrifice, and develop that monument. I have been a part of the Massachusetts Vigil Society, for 33 years. We was going back and forth to Washington and putting up a large POW-MIA flag and an American flag up on the knoll, and bring attention to the still unaccounted for POWs and MIAs from the Vietnam War and all wars. And it's, World War II has them, Korea, and it was, but we concentrated on Southeast Asia. And it was just that whole evolution of it, that wall, when we dedicated the wall in '82, that was the first experience I had to be in the company of true serving Vietnam veterans. And prior to that, I felt so alienated and isolated. But that began to be a purging experience, and evolved from there. And I used to participate in events, hoping that I could bring out guys out of the bush, because we did so much isolate ourselves. And our adage was never group up and never, so you was afraid to get involved with anything. I became a part of the VFW. They gave me my first year membership. And that was an evolving event. But that was an outlet for some of my military experiences. I eventually was to utilize the VA in a special way. I used their vocational rehab programs, and I was able to.
Can you tell us about that? Tell us about your vocational rehab, because that's actually the program I'm in right now, and I know a lot of veterans are in that, and it's really changing a lot of our lives. It's really incredible. So, can you tell us about that? What years did you go to college? Or you voc rehab?
Well, I was in several different colleges, including Cape Cod Community College, where I attended a summer course and took some classes to make it from literature and English, and I was able to evolve from there to go to Northeast Broadcasting School in Boston, and that was under the vocational rehab program. It was the first time that they've ever ventured off into that level. I was able to graduate from vocational, from the broadcasting school, and because of that, the Northeastern Broadcasting School, I still was maintained unemployment, a lot of unemployment. It was the economic deprivation I experienced is amazing, but eventually I was to be a part of homeless. I was a homeless veteran, and I became a part of the Boston Homeless Veterans Shelter. And they did an upgrading or training in computer software application, which was a platform for my able to become a congressional aide to a congressman. And I was able to become an aide and work congressionally for just about 20 years.
Wow.
Fourth Congressional District.
So you took what was coming back from Vietnam, already a difficult situation, difficult couple of years. The wall must have really resonated something in you. To all the voc rehab happened after the wall?
Oh, yes.
So that's really incredible that you went on, used these programs, and did so much.
Well, it was incredible. The trip to the wall was sponsored by SMU, which was Southeastern Massachusetts University, and they was able to sponsor a bus trip to the Vietnam dedication of the Vietnam Wall. Had they not done that, and it was a veterans group that sponsored it, it made it affordable to me, who was basically unemployed and that had very few little means, but they made it affordable so that I was able to go down there for that weekend, travel on that bus, and as I say, I composed that poem, Nam Nam, while I was en route,
Wow.
and it was a moving experience to be in the company of Vietnam veterans that you knew. And I got to march down Pennsylvania Avenue, Constitution Avenue, with the Marical colors, the 23rd Infantry Division, the Marical Division. And it was the first time it had been allowed on American soil since
Wow.
Guadalcanal, and where it lost its colors. But so that was a real purging experience. But the psychological damage that was, I was still actively just substance abuse and everything else, using everything to escape my realities.
As a veteran who's also utilized VA services, I've been sober now for 3 years and 7 days, but who's counting? So thank you so much for being a motivation for another generation. Your story keeps getting bigger and bigger. Your congressional aid, homeless to a congressional aid. I think that really speaks to, hey, there's almost no point at which our homeless veteran, Black man, whatever it is, there's no point at which we cannot continue to serve our society.
And that's one of the true measures of Vietnam veterans, that we have continued to be in service, and I'm definitely and not unique, but in the experiences that I've shared, I went to the ticker tape parade in Chicago. I went to the ticker tape parade in New York City in 1985. And at that point in time, I was a commander of the VFW. And I got to meet, as a matter of fact, Donald Trump put on a wall of letters display and fireworks out there in New York City at that point in time. I got to go to Chicago, the ticker tape parade in Chicago. We did a night owl train from Washington, D.C. to Chicago in 23 hours, I believe. And all along the way, the people were stopping, when the train stopped, they would bring in food and stuff for the car, the Vietnam veterans. And it was in the Southern Road. And the harmonious there wasn't a lot of Black Vietnam veterans from down south on this train, but the togetherness and the camaraderie that we shared as veterans, and that's the title that we shared. Mm-hmm. We took that. There is the true discrimination throughout my experience, and there's books out there called Bloods by Wallace Terry, and I guess that's a spinoff to the Spike Lee movie, Five Bloods. But Wallace Terry wrote that book on Bloods. And there was people in the vet center, like Dr. Ron Armstead, who was one of the first counselors and that was in Boston. I had to travel to Boston and go to counseling in the original Boston Roxbury Vet Center. And he's still a major figure in my whole veterans experience today. He's a chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus Veterans Brain Trust, and he sponsors events that bring veterans together and educates them to the experiences and exposes the veteran female, the seminars that they expose the sacrifice of the female veteran, mm-hmm. and how unique their sacrifice is compared to even the male veterans. But there was so much room for improvement on the veterans system, and we're still evolving into a better place. But any new veterans that's out there, it is smart and wise to seek and obtain the services that's available, without having to surrender your whole self. I'm in recovery. I've been since 82, so I've got 37 years, 11 months, and what is it, 8 days, but who's counting? You know, but I am, because it's been my life, because it's been a whole rude, you know, it's no less of a struggle, but it's an ability to cope that I've been able to be a part of. And you know,
So, Ervin, you say it's no less of a struggle. I want to transition this to one way that I know that you have coped with the stress, and I've also used this, and I know a lot of other veterans have used this, and that is photography. So I think that your photography might have started with actually taking photos of the Vietnam Wall itself. Can you tell us about that?
well, no, my photography started a lot sooner. I have some photographs from Vietnam, but more recently I utilized the vocational rehab services, and I went to Rhode Island School of Design and studied in digital photography.
Wow.
It truly expanded my knowledge of the IT world, you know, and I have a certificate of, you know, from the Rhode Island School of Design, and so that was all part of. But prior to that, I was taking, you know, regular print film, and it was so restrictive because of my inability to afford to produce all of the works. But photography has been a very big part of my recovery, and the creativity that I'm able to express, and that you know, it may just be self-satisfying, but there's a lot of work that I've been able to share, and putting that book together,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I've got many more.
Can you give a little plug to your book? I know we have a couple pictures from it, but I think you have a copy of it right there. It's a photo book. Can you tell us about that? What year did it come out again?
Yeah, 2014. Yeah, 2014. And it was almost the conclusion of our Massachusetts Vigil Society. I'm not sure if,
yeah, we can see it. It's
and some of the photographs in here are, you know, I had to edit it down, but there's quite a bit of stuff that in my archives that I have. It's
I love that this part of your story tells not only that you're using this to cope with your own stress, but also this is sharing so much forward. And this is the whole thing that your generation of veteran really showed us, is that we can come together as veterans, as Vietnam veterans, and make the world a better place for us in moving forward.
yes, service to, as I said, you know, the Vietnam veteran and all the, and we did a display for the Iraqi and Afghanistan global war, you know, and we displayed panels, red panels up at the knoll, and because one of the mothers had mentioned to one of the guys in Vigil Society, said, "Oh, at least you have a place to come to acknowledge the sacrifice," and so we developed this panel, and we did the panels with all the names of the current existing Afghanistan, and those panels were donated to the New Hampshire Vietnam veterans group, a group of veterans up in New Hampshire. But we had them on display in around Massachusetts, the Worcester Vietnam Veterans Memorial up in Worcester. We put that on. Dan Golden, oh my gosh, he was president of the Massachusetts Vigil Society. He's still alive, and he's still doing well. He's down in, but we just buried one of our members of the Vigil Society, and that was a part of the evolution of sharing, you know, acknowledging all of those sacrifices. And there's no permanent place as yet, because the war has not ended, so that you kind of erect a monument in an ongoing conflict, you know. So that was one of the drawbacks, but the
You're
family.
bringing up a link to my generation that we learned, and I'm really just kind of picking this link up since talking to you, that when we were deployed to Iraq, we had T-walls, we called them. They were big concrete walls and, protected from blasts and whatnot. And most T-walls around there had the names of killed service members that had been on that base. And we got that from your generation. That's the Vietnam Wall. That's the remembering it forward. I think maybe some of the World War I early mentality might have been, we're not going to remember. We can't. It's too much. We can't think about that.
That's one of the keys, the remembrance, the acknowledgement of the sacrifices, and it's so necessary and vital to the people that's left behind,
And the family members also, the communities. It was not just us on the battlefield that lost people. It was families, communities, schools, across all ethnicities, races. If you are an American citizen, then you're pretty likely to get stuck into the draft or into the military service over our whole existence. Vana, I don't know if you could bring up that the last photo that we had on that slide of Johnny R.O. Park in Leominster. This is a real personal local example that I have. Jonathan Roberge was killed in Iraq in 2008. He's a native of Massachusetts, Leominster. And this wall right here, it's powerful that you say that it's difficult for us to have a monument because it's not done yet. People are still dying in the global war on terrorism. And this photo that we have here is simply the Massachusetts natives that have been killed in global war on terrorism. And it's an expanding list that unfortunately every couple months or weeks or whatever, a very nice person has to go out there and write a new name on that list that's been newly killed in combat. And what I especially take out of this is the size difference in the two walls, that when we look at the Vietnam Wall, the picture that we have from a helicopter, and you can see how long it is, and all the names are this big, and how powerful this was for me to continue to go see this. So a two-part, huge gratitude to you and your generation for making this a thing. And then also, can you speak to some of the feelings that you felt when with that awe-inspiring look at all these names, look at what we did?
Well, it was when I first went to the Vietnam Wall, there was planks and all the red clay underneath. It was like a red mud, and it was so reminiscent of Vietnam in the monsoon or something, and it was just, I had the name of Carlos Rhodes that I was tracking down at that point in time, which is like my stepbrother, and we had originally was going to go on the buddy plan to the service. He ended up in the Marines. I ended up in the Army. And we weren't, real family, immediate family, but I was able to come home during his burial in May of 1969 after, I was in service, and they allowed me to come home as a family member, and I was part of his honor guard to bury him. But the acknowledgement of those four guys from Wareham, and just this weekend I was down in Otis, and they put out 78,000 flags at the National Cemetery in Otis, and it was such a beautiful tribute because they allocated from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock to put the flags out. But there were so many volunteers and so many young people involved that they was able to complete it by 12:30. And it was really, it's really a remarkable thing. It's the love of a father. Jarrett Monty, Congressional Medal of Honor winner's father, put the effort forward to go and have legislation so that he was allowed to put out flags at the National Cemetery in Bourne, which is part of the National Park Service, but it's an aesthetically restricted place where there's no above ground monuments. So to put the flags out there, he had to get a congressional waiver, and he's been doing it for the last 7 years anyways. And that's just a remarkable tribute. And I mean, I have a wife that's buried out there at the National Cemetery, so I get to visit her in conjunction with visiting all of putting out the flags, and it's just remarkable that there is a lot of support out there, today compared to in the past, but that's a remarkable place in itself, the National Cemetery, the Veterans Day and Memorial Day, and they have wreaths across America, and they have the bugles across America, and those things are probably not going to take place as much with the pandemic, but those were all evoluting kind of events that the healing process and the service process. Service is the most healing or therapeutic aspect of my recovery has been to be able to do for others, or to do something to help another veteran along, and that's been it.
And that's definitely what I pick up, is that your service did not end when you got out of the Army by any means. It sounds like it was very difficult until 1982, and then your service kind of started again. And then you've been doing it since, and all the way until today, when you're still serving a community college that you actually went to help us.
So I got out of Vietnam in '71, and my initial job was with the Three Pyramids Incorporated, which was a part of the poverty program. I did a correspondence course in Vietnam in psychology, sociology, and when I came home, I hadn't received a degree or nothing, but when I came home, I began working in a community poverty program, Three Pyramids Incorporated, and we did social and human services, and I became a liaison, social and human services liaison, and that evolved all the way up. But that was something that was really of a benefit, because so many families and unable to navigate the bureaucracies that exist. So that it started like in 71, 72. One of my first jobs after coming out of Vietnam, and I attempted to attend some courses in Cape Cod Community College at that time, but I was unable to go on. But they had people like Dana Malaferrier and Charlie Andrade and other people that from my community that was attending Cape Cod, and I'd see them over there.
It's absolutely incredible. I want to move over to our Q&A portion of this. So I think we've gotten a pretty good picture of your story. And again, it's incredible. And again, thank you for everything that you and all of your, all the veterans in your generation did. I'm going to start with a really interesting question that we got from the audience. History states that the Vietnam-American War was the first war where soldiers were integrated. Yet all soldiers returned home. It meant coming back to a divided nation by civil rights. How do you believe your military experience and other life experiences impact your involvement?
Well, I'm not sure that's as accurate. The integration was prior to Vietnam, and therefore, but the impact of the integration, as I say, the Brother Bloods, the book Bloods, it talked about how we would merge together in the war, and that, you didn't call anybody a derogatory name if your survival depended upon it. So there was a lot more tolerance of the races, you know, because we were in a common goal is to survive or you know, get through that war. And yeah, I think I understood the question, but basically I think that the Korean War was integrated, and there was much more integration in the course of before Vietnam.
That's what I thought. And then I talked to we have tomorrow, we're going to be interviewing Charles Daly, who wrote a book about the Korean War, and he has some that's what I thought, that the Korean War was the first time to be integrated, and he served in 1951, so early on in the war, said that he had never ever worked with an African American in his service, in his time. And he has a lot to say about that, you know, which is good. But it was surprising to me. So it really was. No, his service, he truly was there saying there is segregation.
Yeah, I knew that there was like the Market Point Marines, which is a distinctive group of Marines that were segregated from the other integration, but I thought that there was a little more integration.
That's what I had thought also. So it must be that the Vietnam War was the first widespread, start to finish, were integrated the whole time, I think, opposed to the Korean War started totally segregated units, and then ended up probably towards the end of them making the realization that a service member is a service member, and that service is service. And so I want to move on to the next question. I like that you referenced the Spike Lee movie. Is it called Da Five Bloods?
The Five Bloods, yes.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, it was on Netflix because of I guess because of the pandemic. They released it on Netflix compared to it would have been on the movie screen, I guess.
So coming back to that question, when you came back to America in '71, there was a massive civil unrest in America. You know, I wasn't there, but I can look at history books and watch some very sad and scary movies. What was it like you coming from a place of, okay, unsegregated units, we're on the battlefield. It doesn't matter what, you know, like you said, hey, safety first, the mission is first, we're going to do our thing. And then you can come back to a nation where, you know, at least what we're seeing on the news is, hey, this is total civil unrest in the 70s. This is, it's all, there's a lot of race discussion, and it's tough.
Well, I don't know if there was race discussion as much as there was actions and omissions. You know, the opportunities were not available to people of color, you know, and, you know, there was a lot of struggling. Like I say, the only aspect of the poverty program was in effect, which initially, I guess, was, and that was a means of employment, but of course, later on, because of that, then I was able to get into politics, local politics. I became a member of the housing authority and served in that within the community, and that was a means of inclusion, you know, because by me being there, just my presence alone made it somewhat acceptable to others to possibly pursue, and yet the presence, you know, just that nothing is obvious to the uninformed, as they said. You know, Confucius said, I believe, you know, and that's one of the things, contributions that I've tried to make is to express that perspective.
Thank you so much, Ervin. Another question, talking particularly about post-traumatic stress disorder. I know in your poem you talked about, I forget how you said it, but the mind likes to wander back to those times, whether it's Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever the trauma may be, the mind tend to wanders back. You've been home from combat for a while, longer than I've been around. A question that I have is a young veteran who has post-traumatic stress. Do these memories fade? Do they get quieter? Do they go away? What's your experience?
I call them involuntary recall. And therapy is definitely necessary. I mean, I'm a part of the Vets Outreach Center, and I've received counseling from quite a few psychologists, and over that's all been a modification and a stimulation, and being in service helps that. But that involuntary recall, the insomnia, the whole scenario of all the conditions of PTSD, but sometimes it just gets superseded by your ability to help somebody else, and there are so many, you say, hey, I'm bad, but this, if I visit a VA hospital, or if I've got a chance to support some other veteran, or really give what is given to me, and it's cause not for a successful, I'm still a struggling, not so poor anymore, but I get along.
It sounds like you found a really fantastic life that a lot of us could look forward to and say, hey, that's a good life to have as a veteran. You're paying it forward, you're serving your community, which you already did. You served your country, and then you spend your life paying it forward. Fortunately, it's
my counselor would say there's a lot of personal neglect in that too, because I'm not so great, because I mean, maybe I could have a lot better car. I could have a lot more repairs on my house, and I could be a lot better.
Self-care is important. Sure, I do a lot of therapy, and I certainly recognize how helpful it is. I want to move to one more question before we wrap up. Is there any advice you would give to a man or a woman of color who is in the military today and facing discrimination?
Well, advice is not something. I mean, the struggle of knowing who we are, and accepting that, I recognize the fact that privilege has not been available to me, and hopefully that I would be able to do something to make sure that it's available to the next generation or the people behind me. But we do what we can at the present time, and recognize, we have today, and we do what we can. I'm not sure I'm looking to give advice.
I think you just, what you just said was perfect. I think that was advice that, we need to put everything on an acceptance change scale and take care of ourselves in the first place. Tootsie, Tootsie, I keep doing that, but Ervin, is there anything that you want to say before we close? I'm going to extend a whole bunch of gratitude, but before we close.
Well, I want to reflect the gratitude that I have to you, because you being a veteran yourself and you reaching out to the point of inviting me to participate is this being Vietnam Veterans Week, Vietnam Veterans Day, not Vietnam Veterans Day, but Veterans Day. And I had the privilege of reading the proclamation in Wareham, the 11th day of the 11th month of the 11th hour of the 2011th year. And that was a very major event in my life, being a part of the congressional delegation or congressional office of Congressman Bonnie Frank for those many years. I served in many as a surrogate to different events, and I had that privilege of including some of the congressional or presidential proclamations on Veterans Day. And as you see, I have my uniform. I'm the chaplain of, and I just this week I performed 2 funerals or gave military honors to 2 veterans, and and that was it's sad, but yet I appreciate that opportunity to be able to do that. I mean, the family I know is appreciative of it. The fact that there's a poem or ritual that I recite, and at the services or the burial of a comrade, and that comes out of the VFW book, the manual, and it's very moving and it's very fitting for each veteran, We here pay the last tribute of respect to our departed comrade. When the call of our country was heard, self was forgotten in the cause of the greater good. As a brave man, he watched away with an abiding faith in his God, his country, and his flag. The red of our country's flag was made red of our heroism. The white, more stainlessly pure by the motives which impelled him. And in the very fields of our nation's glorious banners, the blues have been glorified by the service he has given for America's ideals. And that's, I think that's so meaningful. I was involved in I feel I attributed to the fact that the Department of Defense has made it so that every veteran gets acknowledged at his burial or at the wake services. And that happened when Raymond Gomes of Onset, who was an ex-POW and a recipient of the Silver Star from the Italian government, was buried, and it had no governmental representation at that funeral service. And I, at that time, was not in the congressional office, but I pursued through the Veterans Affairs or Congress, Kennedy was at the time. And eventually it was evolved that the Department of Defense took on that role to make sure that every veteran received it, that with families request they receive the acknowledgement by the federal government. They provide the casket liner, they provide the grave, they provide the flag, but there was no military presentation at the cemetery or at the wake, and now there is.
Ervin, I cannot thank you enough on so many levels for coming out here and talking to us. The feedback that I've already received is tremendous. I'm not only thanking you for what you did today, but I want to thank you for everything you've done in your life. I also want to extend some gratitude for bringing light on some of the problems that you faced, so that future generations of veterans aren't going to come home feeling broken and unwanted. And these benefits that we have now that I'm in school right now for, and a lot of other veterans are for, I attribute to all the stuff that you just said, that your generation of veterans did all this hard work for us. So a big part of this week has been to show that we do face turbulent times, whether as veterans, people, Americans, but through our community, networking, and caring for each other, we can work to make our society better. and ensure that our nation's peacemakers are never forced to come back to an unwanting nation. So to continue this week of incredible programs, today at 3, we have Michaela Black from the VA and Vet Success on campus to present about supporting student veterans and understanding VA education benefits. First half of that is directed towards faculty and staff, so tell your friends. Also tomorrow, extremely exciting, we have, I mentioned this earlier, Make Peace or Die, recent author of that book, Korean War veteran Charles U. Daly and his son are going to be presenting. Similar, I will be interviewing and we'll get his and his son point of view. And we're also going to be able to talk about how PTSD often vicariously moves around families. So again, Ervin, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone that came. And goodbye.